All right. So we're going to get started. It looks like we're having a slight issue with the stream to Twitter and LinkedIn. So I think John's going to work on getting those streams going, but we're going to get started. In the meantime, we are live on YouTube. So welcome to Argo Unpacked. My name is Dan Garfield. I'm going to be hosting today with the ever amazing Andrew Block.
Hey, folks. I guess I would say ever amazing. I'm looking to see where he or she might be.
That's you, my friend.
Okay.
Well, we are today. We're not going to have Ravital with us as we normally would. She has a sports engagement today and a tournament that she's working on. So we were going to wish her luck, and hopefully she wins that thing and come back and tell us about her victory when we have our next show in about I think 2 weeks. I'm still making my way home from KubeCon, so I'm not in my normal setup. But we're going to maybe take a minute and just talk a little bit debriefing on KubeCon, and then we're going to get into what's going on with secrets management with Argo and Kubernetes. And this is where I asked for Andrew's help because he's presented a number of great talks on this and has a lot of great experience with it. First of all, at KubeCon, we announced Argo CD 3.0. I mean, technically we announced it beforehand with the release candidate. With open source, you kind of announce stuff, in the issue, in the meetings, and all these other places. Can't really keep it a secret. But that was very well received. I was super happy about that. Reggie and Michael and a bunch of other of the maintainers did a bunch of interviews about that. So that was very well received. And ArgoCon also was the biggest co-located event at KubeCon this year, and it wasn't by a small amount. It was by a wide margin. I don't have final numbers from the CNCF, but they did tell me that we were the largest by a wide bit. So that was really good. Yeah. Did you go to? Did you actually? Oh yeah. Didn't you? You had the panel on OCI that you were doing, and that session was very. I was in that session, and it was very well attended.
It's crazy how just big the co-located events are. They're almost bigger than the actual events.
They are. I keep on telling the team that at some point we're going to be we're going to make KubeCon the co-located event for ArgoCon. That's my plan.
One of these days, aspirational.
Yeah, we're setting that vision high. The CNCF also released new data. I should share this on the screen. They completed a new survey, and there was some new data that came out of that. And one of them, and I'm going to highlight it here. If I can share my screen, just a sec. Sorry, should have prepared this earlier. Poor planning on my part. Yeah, this is 77% of respondents said some, much, or nearly all of their deployment practices and tools adhere to GitOps principles. So this is one that I thought we could maybe visit for just a minute before we dive into secrets. First off, Andrew, what's your reaction when you just read that off the cuff?
It's not enough. I want more. I want more, but that's just me, and maybe it's aspirational. But that just says a lot about the community and a lot of what the GitOps working group and everyone has been working on to try to promote GitOps principles more holistically.
Yeah, I agree that I thought yeah, that's not enough. I also was super excited because 77% is a lot, and I thought, oh, that's really good progress to see the principles getting that kind of adoption. But then I also was thinking, well, their deployment practices and tools adhere to GitOps principles. I was thinking that's not necessarily 100% adhere. They probably are like, yeah, we like to store our state in a declarative format because we use, Terraform and Kubernetes manifests. So we've done one of the principles of GitOps, but they may not have, an agent actually continuously observing state and doing continuous reconciliation. So I think that percentage of people that are actually achieving that part of the GitOps auxiliary, principles is probably substantially lower. But so I guess I see it two ways. It's like, hey, it's really cool that we have this adoption, we have this momentum. That's great. But also, I have a feeling that a lot of people say that they're doing it, but they're not actually doing all of it. They're doing, maybe just the first principle, maybe the second
It's
principle,
a
but
bit of
not
a
the rest.
journey, as you mentioned, you're just being able to get number one, just getting it declaratively, but then also how are we going to reconcile it? There are more traditional tools that, aside from like Argo CD, like Ansible and some or Jenkins and some CI processes that can continuously that can go in and apply it. But is it going to go ahead and make sure it's always continuously being managed? That's where you kind of have an advantage to tools like Argo that does have a little bit more insights into, the ongoings of the Kubernetes API server.
Yeah, because without if you're not doing those last two kind of components, you could just run a cron job to just do kubectl apply, and
Yep.
you've done kind of the first two principles. But without the observability aspect of like, oh, a resource changed in production, we actually need to deal with that, and that does cause issues for teams. They've got maybe some controllers running around that are doing things, and they didn't realize how they're modifying resources, and until they have a tool like Argo CD that exposes it. So it's not an Argo CD specific principle, but it definitely is a lot harder to get there without Argo CD. So yeah, this was a good survey. This was some good news, and you can dig into that. It's you can find it on my Twitter account, and also the CNCF Twitter account is linking to that new report that just came out in London. So I'm excited to dig into the data. I haven't had a chance to dig into it too deeply yet, but that was the big thing. Any other big things that you wanted to highlight from coming out of KubeCon, Andrew?
I mean, a lot of it just comes down to lots going on out there in the community. We have AI, we have observability, we have, especially when you're in Europe, anything when it comes to being a little bit more green and how we're handling, the resource management side of things. We always hear that more typically in that KubeCon versus, more like the other regions like North America. And then obviously we have two new KubeCons coming up next month, or 2 months from now, up in June, over in Japan and China.
Yeah, are you going to either of those?
Potentially, if I get off the wait list in Japan. One of my sessions did get accepted, so other members of my proposal will be going to China, but I have a conflict that came up, which is a bummer, but I'm glad to at least see the proposal get accepted.
Yeah, well, good. Okay. Yeah, to hopefully you can figure that out. But KubeCon Japan, I was on the program committee of, and I was pretty happy with the quality of talks that were submitted. And I know Octopus Deploy is going to be there, so we'll have a booth. So if you are in Japan in June and you want to see what's latest and greatest with CodeFresh, with Octopus Deploy, we'll be there. But and then KubeCon China, I think we also have a booth at. So there's so many now, because I was thinking I've been to every KubeCon, but I haven't been to the new India one. I haven't been to the China one. I haven't been to the Japanese one.
Yeah. And they're like back to back. So I think China is the first one in the second week of June, and then the third one's right after that. So it's crazy.
Yeah, it's to the point where you can't really reasonably cover all the KubeCons anymore. You have to be selective.
You gotta work. You gotta work at it.
Okay, so if you have any questions or comments about KubeCon, ArgoCon, go ahead and ping us. If you aren't already subscribed for updates from Argo Unpacked, make sure to go do that at codefresh.io/Argo Unpacked. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. There's an Argo Unpacked LinkedIn. And of course, on X. We do have a Blue Sky. I don't have the link handy right now. And then we do have all of the ArgoCon talks are now already on YouTube. So you can just search for ArgoCon on YouTube.
They were actually up, I think, the night of the event.
Yeah, they were super quick with it.
I know, it's crazy.
It was, we looked the next day in the Argo booth. We pulled it up and noticed that some of the talks already had like over 100 views, which is kind of crazy. It's like an overnight, like, oh wow, like, but here people are paying attention. I know it's not millions of views. This isn't, we're not doing the TikTok stuff of like, smashing grains of sand with your fist or something to make funny noises. Those get millions of views. We're doing hardcore engineering. That's going to be a smaller audience. Okay. So today's topic is secrets management in Argo and Kubernetes. And this is an area where I see people struggle quite a bit. And part of it is maybe not embracing the model of eventual consistency. Some of it is mixing the line between manifest generation and secrets injection, which is something that we talk about with Argo CD 3.0. But Andrew, where do you want to start that discussion?
I guess let's just start at the very, very, very bottom, which is just secrets in Kubernetes in general. For those who are just getting new to Kubernetes, I mean, at this point, fortunately, many people have at least gotten an understanding of Kubernetes. They at least know the primitives. I'll just say it again. It's base64 encoded out of the box. So your secrets really aren't secret. It's a bit of a misnomer. So that's step one in knowing that.
They're obfuscated.
Yeah, there you go. But even still, it's not even close. Yeah. So the key thing is just knowing the level playing field of what you're having to work with. No matter what, if you have access to the API server with an additional RBAC on top of that, you can see the data. And that's a challenge. Many organizations, game over.
Yeah.
You can, of course, encrypt etcd and at least be able to secure it at rest. But in transit and over the wire, it's still basically in the open.
Yeah, I mean, over the wire, there's SSL.
There's TLS, right? There's but TLS, still, yeah. The actual data.
Right, not SSL. I guess none of us have been using SSL for a long, long time. We're all just using TLS. Yeah. But yeah, so it's encrypted over TLS. But like the alternative, which is where people often go wrong with Argo CD, is they might use a config management plugin or something that will inject those values into the manifest at runtime, which means that it's just in plain text in Kubernetes manifests. So that's the worst case scenario in my view.
Well, there's a couple of different areas. I kind of want to take a step back into what are the two areas of secrets that you're going to have in Argo CD. Number one is going to be just the Argo CD server itself, because in theory, Argo still has to manage sensitive resources. And a sensitive resource can mean different things to different organizations, different individuals. TLS certificate can be sensitive because it might have some sensitive data on it, especially if you have the private and public keys. The public keys you obviously are going to have a little more open, but the private keys themselves, those are very secure in many organizations. Especially I work with those in the financial services, government, etc. They're very, very cautious about who can have access to what. So
yeah, this is how Argo communicates to Kubernetes clusters, how it pulls information from a Git repo, how it gets information from an image repository, potentially.
Also, securing itself. Securing itself when it comes to being able to expose ingress, you need to be able to manage that certificate. And that certificate could be one of two places. It could obviously be over in an Nginx ingress controller, or it could be within Kubernetes or within Argo CD's purview as well, because you can configure multiple layers of where TLS is managed.
Yeah, so there's those, and then so the first layer is sort of like how Argo CD manages its own secrets, and then the second is how you deal with your secrets that you want to get deployed to your cluster. And,
the workloads themselves.
Yeah, the workloads themselves. Yeah. So maybe a good place to start is with Argo CD itself. Yeah. And you and I were talking at KubeCon, and you were talking about how we do workload identity. And I actually had never used that feature in Argo CD before, so I wasn't really familiar with it. What blows my mind, like I'm an Argo CD maintainer in theory, like I should know everything, right? But really, there's quite a bit going on in Argo CD. So there are some things that like just aren't features that I had used before.
And that's one that I'm actually, and I had a chance to chat with a couple of different maintainers at either both ArgoCon as well as KubeCon last week. And that's one thing that, because I focus a lot in the security space, hence why I'm kind of talking about this. I want to get more visibility and make the use of workload identity to be more prevalent across the Argo CD ecosystem, because it solves a lot of the challenges. So there are several different areas of workload identity that are currently built into Argo CD. The most common that you're going to see individuals is going to be, how do you connect to remote clusters? You can obviously use a long-term token that's associated to a specific cluster with the service account, but that itself is
the default way.
That's the default way. That's the typical way you get started. However, workload identity eliminates that. You don't need to create a service account on there. You just need to go ahead and provide a way for your your Argo CD instance to be able to authenticate against remote Kubernetes servers. And many of the public cloud providers, the big ones, the Google Cloud Platform, the Azure, as well as AWS, EKS, and AKS, provide a capability called Workload Identity. AWS calls it STS, so which you can then authenticate using a set of short-lived credentials. And that's where we're looking to make sure we get a little bit more broad use, not only just by the usability of the feature, but also having it incorporate more of the ecosystem that Argo actually manages.
Mm-hmm. So to use the workload identity, so for example, with AWS, what do I need to do differently in Argo CD when I add the cluster?
So you're going to have to go ahead and make use of an exec plugin that's built into Argo, and then be able to configure information related to your cluster as well as remote instances.
Okay. And so I'm not going to just use the normal Argo CD cluster add CLI command that is the traditional way of doing it.
That's a good question. I need to double check and see if that's actually part of it. Let's see, Argo CD cluster add. Let's see what options it provides.
There is an exec command option in there, so maybe that's part of
that. I think might be it. Yeah, because usually that's how you end up getting information for it. So it's potential that it does have flags for it. You will also see in some of the examples, you're going to see the AWS cluster name and the role ARN. Because it's using for AWS, it's using assuming roles, and that's how you're able to authenticate and federate identity across different clusters. So there are features out there, but making it so it's a little bit more visible, more widely used, I think is even more important. And one of the areas that I've been working on recently is around SPIFFE Inspire, which provides a agnostic method of workload identity. AWS, Azure, as well as Google, they're tied to a specific cloud provider. But what SPIFFE Inspire provides is a universal way of managing workloads. I have a lot of customers, and myself don't work necessarily in the cloud provider environments. How can they go ahead and make use of the benefits of workload identity in those type of environments? So looking in maybe introducing that as another alternative to the 3 public cloud providers as a way for you to manage access to Kubernetes as well as to Argo CD.
Yeah, and ultimately the big advantage of using these workload identities is that you have a rotating secret access, right? So if it leaked somewhere, it automatically is getting expired.
They're time bound, and that's one of the, especially if you're looking for long-term tokens. I mean, long-term tokens in Kubernetes is actually deprecated. They deprecated that, I think, in 1.25. It's still around. However, the default now is to use more short-lived credentials.
Okay. So, and this isn't something that I've understood fully with these workload identity. I understand that it's more secure because there's a rotation going on. But at the end of the day, like, I'm providing a configuration for how to get that token. And why is that more secure than me providing an API key that it doesn't expire?
Yeah, because the Kubernetes API actually goes ahead and manages the lifecycle of that token. And that token itself, any JOT token, has information in it that represents yourself. And then you're able to then go in and take that identity that is then presented to the remote Kubernetes instance and says, hey, I'm this person. I want to authenticate against you. What access do I have? And policies are set up on the remote Kubernetes cluster saying this individual, this entity, has the ability to perform certain actions.
Okay.
And your Kubernetes environment, et cetera, trusts the issuer of that token that's provided.
So in order to steal my workload identity, they would need to steal my private, my certificate
issuer,
information.
It's very difficult to do so because there's
and then I would need to be coming from the right, like, DNS location, right? Network location. Okay.
There's a number of, with security, there's layers of the onion. And there are different ways that you can provide security. One of it is through role-based access control. Another one is going to be through firewall, more traditional networking options as well. So you put all these tools and these principles together, and you can really secure your environments more than a simple token is going to provide.
Yeah. So the analogy would be that if I'm going through customs, border patrol, whatever, one way to identify my identity is to ask something that only I should know, like my social security number or my driver's license ID. But of course, anybody could just get that information and they'll just
Exactly.
show up with that. But in this case, they're like, we're going to scan your face and make sure that you match all of the databases that we have for who
Yep.
Dan Garfield is. And by doing that,
You
it
know,
doesn't really matter if
we
somebody's
look
using the
here
same
at
code.
Google Authenticator, same thing. You have a short-lived token that you're ending up using, and then you're able to then use that as your identity. You can prove that who you are.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so in Argo CD, we support this for AWS, for Azure, I believe,
Yep, and Google. The top three we do
and Google.
have.
Okay.
There are other areas outside of just the remote cluster configuration because there are different areas. One of them is being able to authenticate to remote repositories for Git. You can
Git
use that.
repositories.
You can
Okay.
use that for on the Azure side. There's support for Azure communicating to like an Azure DevOps type of repository. So
Okay, and
that's
then
one
I'm
way.
going to be getting workload identity, and it's the same. All the same benefits are there. And I assume I actually I haven't looked at the documentation on this on the Argo side. Is it pretty good?
It's pretty good. There is stuff out there already, and that's actually one of my outcomes of KubeCon is to kind of create a bit of a matrix about the coverage of workload identity across all the different Argo CD components to visibly and kind of raise awareness about where we are. We do have coverage on the Argo side, and where we might be able to extend some of the functionality to new areas. So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be coming out in the community soon.
Very cool. Okay. Great. So, okay. So yeah, we've got it for clusters. We've got it for Git repos. And then do we have it for image repositories?
So that's kind of where my mind's going next, since I spoke about OCI artifacts at KubeCon, being able to handle it via OCI. But remember, Argo doesn't really typically handle OCI directly. Usually we have it through the manifest. The manifests themselves are the ones that provide the credentials to the actual Kubernetes clusters. But with OCI direct integration with Argo, you now have to go ahead and communicate directly with a remote repository, a registry as well, to be able to authenticate. And the challenge with that is that there's no standardized way to handle authentication. There's
For Docker registries?
the OCI spec has a workflow, but many different registry implementations have dedicated APIs for how you exchange the JOT token for a actual registry credential.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that wasn't that. I mean, it is part of the OCI spec, but it's a poorly supported part of the OCI spec.
there's support for it, but then each individual registry may have additional support for an API that you're able to exchange a token, like an actual like workload token for a more like registry token.
Got it.
So I can say I have a JOT. Here's my JOT, and then here's username and password that you can then put into the actual flow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, nice. Okay, so that probably covers the main stuff for Argo CD. And just to double click on one thing that you said for people that maybe didn't quite catch it, normally Argo CD doesn't really care about OCI objects like a Docker image because it's just applying a manifest and it's up to the Kubernetes cluster to go and actually pull that thing. So it needs to have like an image pull secret set up.
Yep.
And that's its own life cycle. Argo CD doesn't really care. It's just passing manifests. But now that we're going to have support for OCI as a source of truth in addition to Git, then we do have to care and we have to handle it, and we have to handle these special use cases. So that's something that you've been working on for this last year, along with Blake Peterson, I know, has made a lot of contributions here, and a few others.
Yeah, it's a bit of a small working group that's really been focused on OCI integration, but we're hoping that we're able to take some of the learnings that were coming out of this working group to be able to see how we can apply these security practices across different areas and different use cases.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so for the second part of the equation, so now we've talked about Argo CD secrets management, and by adopting workload identity, you get this much more secure, stable approach. You can't just lose your keys and people can steal them and start doing stuff. You actually have a much more robust security posture. So we're in great shape there. Now, for how I get my secrets into my how I manage my secrets for my resources, one of the popular patterns that has emerged over the last couple of years has been the use of config management plugins, such as there's like a Vault
Coming from Vault, that's
plugin
probably
for
the
Argo
number one.
CD.
And it's probably the number one when it comes to secrets management is the Vault config plugin that you're basically able to take entity information for the remote instance, and then it basically dynamically renders it on the fly as the resources are being rendered.
Yeah. So the way that inside of Argo CD,
Right.
so that has become a popular pattern that has developed. And with Argo CD 3.0, we updated our documentation on secrets management, and we specifically came out with a recommendation not to inject secrets during your config generation in that way. And this is an area where um, it's really because it's sort of a Kubernetes anti-pattern to do that, but it's also just not good security practice within Argo CD. It's not good security practice within Kubernetes. And you do see, and I do have some sympathy because there are some different use cases that are merged in here where you're taking a third-party Helm chart off the shelf, and it has as a value argument an API key field. It's very
Yep.
common. So put that API key field in the value and deploy the Helm chart. And of course, the only way to do that with Argo CD means that you have to look it up when Argo CD renders that chart. And once it's rendered that chart, Argo CD will go and apply those manifests. So I kind of blame third-party Helm chart providers a little bit for this, rather than having passing an API key. It would be better if I had like a secret reference. Tell me the name of where it is
And
to
then
get.
you really hit upon the two primary ways to manage secrets in Kubernetes. Basically, you have a either encrypted or obfuscated way that you are able to render it on the fly. Another good example of a config management plugin that's being used is around Helm. There's a Helm secrets one as well. There's one as well as Customize a KSOPs is another one that is being used quite a bit. That I know of, especially since I had a booth at KubeCon and a whole bunch of people came up and said, "Hey, I used KSOPs for Argo CD." I'm like, "Well, number one, great, thank you for using SOPs, but two, just good to know who's using what in Kubernetes."
Yeah.
But the other one is going to be basically referencing an external entity. So having some tool, using an operator that's running on your cluster itself, the remote cluster, wherever the manifests are being rendered, actually go ahead and realize or is able to detect when it should take action, and then be able to say, okay, I have a reference here. Take the information in this reference and go ahead and find the actual value and then realize that as a secret.
Now, this is where you've recommended and I've adopted and also recommend external secrets, the external secrets provider, because it works with pretty much any external secrets resource.
I can think of I think it covers almost every one. And one of the best parts about it is you can extend it. So you can create your own provider if one doesn't happen to already exist. And I know there's even an organization, a company that got created called External Secret, I think it is, that was created because of that operator. Some of the former maintainers of the project, or some of the current maintainers, ended up spinning up their own company.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, and with external secrets, like I could store my secrets in Vault still if I was already doing that. I could store them in 1Password. I could store them in Google, KMS.
Any of the cloud providers, the Azure Secrets, the AWS Secrets Manager, etc.
The primary mode of operation here is that it will pull that external value, watch for it to be updated, and it will create a Kubernetes secret that I can then reference from my manifests so that I have access.
Yep.
And that's considered, that model, I think, Andrew, you brought up earlier that it's caused some heartburn for folks that don't want to have this sort of obfuscated, slightly, base 64 encoding is barely obfuscation, but at least it's not plain text. inside of Kubernetes. There are some other approaches like CSI driver, where it can mount the secrets directly as a volume inside of your cluster. So they're only available in that sort of plain text inside of the specific workload. They can't be referenced from outside, and there's not a something from the Kubernetes API that can leak it.
Another one is going to be on like the Vault secrets operator. You're able to add annotations to workloads, and that operator and there's a admission policy that will mutate the resources as they're created to inject a sidecar that will make those secrets available for your applications to then start leveraging.
Yeah, and there's not a similar option within the external secrets operator to do that, right?
They've been adding some new capabilities. They may have added something similar to that. It's been a while since I had really dug into the operator, but I know that community continues to add more and more features, expand the coverage of the different providers they have. You can double check and see if they've actually gotten a little further with that.
Okay. So are you sticking with your recommendation in general for external secrets, or would you prefer people adopt that CSI driver model, or like even the Vault native operator, annotation injection model?
A lot of it comes down to what security tools you use. When it comes to Vault, some of the newer enhancements around the HashiCorp ecosystem actually now provides that as a first party, actual supporting component. So if you're an enterprise organization that has support for Vault, that comes as part of your subscription. So there's no additional risk. I know, like on the OpenShift side, I'm from Red Hat. We're introducing the external secrets operator as a supported component in a new coming version. So you have one option there. But for other organizations that have prior contracts with Vault, you do have that included capability. So I always say, look and see what your options are out there, and then looking and then reviewing what supportability from a enterprise contract perspective you have. That usually does influence the decision on what tools to use.
I did just go through this actually with 1Password, because for a home lab, and you already have 1Password. 1Password as a secrets provider is pretty awesome. Like, it's like, hey, I can just manage it in my 1Password the way I normally do. And I actually had a conversation with who is it? Anyway, some folks on Twitter about adopting it, and I basically had said, like, oh, well, you should probably use it with external secrets, because then it's sort of generic and that's nice. But with 1Password, in order to use it with external secrets, you actually need to deploy an additional 1Secrets component that it can pull from. And so by the time you've done it, I actually was like, it's actually probably just easier just to use the native 1Password integration, than to actually go the kind of the extra step to do it with external secrets, even though in theory I prefer external secrets, across the board. But in that specific case, it was kind of like, if you're just doing it for one cluster, it's easier probably just use the native one.
Agreed.
But we can all agree on the backside of this that we don't really want secrets being injected into the manifests during creation, because then they just end up sitting plain inside of manifests, and that's the worst of all possible situations.
That is that's by far the worst.
Yeah, if you just have default access to Argo CD pre 3.0, you can look at pods, you can look at all those Kubernetes resources that are part of your project by default. So you'd be able to look up and see what secrets were added there in plain text, no problem. Whereas if you're at least using an external secrets, there is at least some step to obfuscation. That is another change also that we made in Argo CD 3.0, is that by default, you no longer get access to logs of resources.
Good.
And we added fine-grained control for which resources you have access to. So you can say, for example, that I want my user to be able to delete pods, but not deployments.
Right.
I want them to be able to work, delete a service, but not this. So you do have that fine-grained control, so you can kind of build out your security model. That's the building blocks. It's not necessarily a default, but there is definitely a better default behavior in Argo CD3 for a lot of this stuff.
Good.
Nice. Okay, so that's that's Argo CD internal secrets, and then that's Argo CD managing my own secrets. Is there any other component here we should be thinking about from a secrets management perspective?
Well, a lot of it comes down to, I want to take a step back to how Argo actually manages secure communication and secure resources. Everything with Argo is a declarative resource. One of the best parts about Argo is that everything is declarative. So in reality, there is no state. So all secrets and all credentials are managed as secrets in Kubernetes. Everything from the clusters, as we mentioned earlier, by leveraging workload identity, we can eliminate the need to configure those sensitive resources in Kubernetes secrets. But think about the other options out there. We mentioned repositories. There are also repository templates, as well as repo credentials when it comes to app sets. So app sets introduce a fourth option for the secret types, and they are referenced via a label on that secrets resource. So it's like Argo CD.io/secret type or something like that. Mm-hmm. That was the name of it. Let me go look. I happen to have a Argo cluster that I'm using right now. I'm just going to go ahead and just look at what the configuration actually looks like.
Is this your home lab?
Yeah, you know me. I was going to have something. I want to make sure I at least have some examples, so I can at least sound somewhat intelligent. Yeah. Let's see. So for the actual label name itself is going to be the argocd.argoproj.io/secret-type, and the default value is repository. If you want to create one to have a secure Git repository, but cluster is going to be the one for remote clusters.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is actually an area where when we were writing the GitOps principles, we left kind of intentionally open, because the secrets management aspect of GitOps has people, some people felt like, oh, I have to put the secrets in Git. So obviously we don't want plain secrets in Git. So then you have to use a tool like, what's that Git operator that watches Git? That you could put your secrets in Git. Sealed secrets. Thank you.
Oh, sealed secrets. Yep, that's another one.
So like you could use something like sealed secrets. There's a bunch, and SOPs. I mean, right? You can commit your secrets to SOPs encrypted, and that's a safe pattern. But it was an area where when we were writing the GitOps principles, we were like, we feel like there's a lot of work that's going to be happening and evolving in the secret space. We just kind of don't want to take an opinion on it and pre-bake the right solution, because we feel like there's going to be a lot of innovation here that's happening. And it definitely has since GitOps 1.0 came out. Now we have a ton of options, but we definitely do want to address those anti-patterns like injecting secrets during configuration generation. Now, the other side of this flip coin is like a tool like Flux does their manifest rendering server side inside of a Kubernetes cluster, which of course gives Flux the ability to do something like a Helm value lookup, whereas that sort of breaks the security model of Argo CD. So we tell people not to use those or rely upon them. I did make a config management plugin as a proof of concept for Argo CD that would go and do value lookups, but this meant that your manifest generation process needs to have access to a Kubernetes cluster and run against that API. And of course, manifest generation is like
you come into that gray area of Argo, the security principles, because Helm, as at least Dan, at least added support now that when you do Helm templating. So when you do Helm integration with Argo CD, there's no Helm install, no Helm upgrade. It's all Helm template. Before, in the Helm world, you had no ability to talk to the Kubernetes API server. You at least now do have that option, but it's one that I know the Argo community really hasn't really adopted because of that secure methodology and mentality that it has for the separation of concerns between what it manages and what Kubernetes manages.
Yeah, that template, the ability to use a template dry run server is where it can pull that value. And that is something that I pushed for within the Helm project. Somebody else did it. Thank you so much. And then I leveraged it to do that proof of concept tool. And I think I tweeted about it at the time and was like, if this gets enough likes, I'm going to drop everything and go build this proof of concept. I think I said like I'll go add it into Argo CD, which was a little bridge too far. But I did build it. I put it out there, and then nobody used it because I think everybody looked at it and said, "Oh, this like I have to like mount a cluster secret to my repo server and have it like as part of my config management plugin and have it go and actually talk to the cluster." And then they all grimaced and said, "I sure as hell don't want to do that." So so that Helm value lookup pattern has gone away a little bit, and the last problem that's part of this that people are still kind of mixing the config management, the manifest generations and secrets injection, is when they need something like what we characterize as hydration that's supposed to take place on the cluster. So they have, for example, an ARN value that is supposed to be used from that cluster. And how do they mount that in? And that ARN can't be passed in as just a secret because it actually needs to be part of like a label or an annotation on the resource. And this is a place where I feel a little bit like Kubernetes is not supporting eventual consistency well enough, because we're saying put something like an ARN here, but also you can't get it from a secret. And I basically need that kind of same secret support for other resources. And so the solution that we've recommended to some people who really need that is you need to have an operator with an injection webhook that is going to add that value, that annotation, because Kubernetes does not provide a native way to do that. And we don't want to do it as part of the manifest generation. Does that all make sense as like a problem set?
Oh yeah. It's a lot. It's really a lot of things that the community has to think about, and secrets management just in general is nothing specific to Argo. Every single component of Kubernetes, and even outside of Kubernetes, has to deal with. And with many organizations, how high in the pecking order are you concerned about secrets management? It should be pretty high because it's anything related to security, but it is, as I just mentioned, only just one aspect of the whole process.
Do you think it's overkill to add a value ref to annotations and other fields that need things like an ARN or a subnet or whatever?
I don't think it's that big of an issue to add an annotation to it. I mean, it should be fairly simple, but especially if you're looking to use a pattern across a large organization, making it easy on the developers to bootstrap that and make it easier so they don't have to think about it. It's just part of the process is one that like a tool like an IDP and like a Backstage looks to try to introduce as well, to try to make it so I don't have to think about Kubernetes. I shouldn't care about Kubernetes. I care about my app. I care about solving business challenges. Now, you and I in the community.
I want to obfuscate that.
Right. You and I in the community are really spending a lot of time in Argo land, but in reality, most developers don't care. They just want to get their app out there so they can go ahead and solve business problems.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's one of the places where Argo provides a lot of value because it has a way that the developers can go and look at, okay, something's not working. At least I can get access to the resources and figure out, maybe look at the logs, maybe understand it. And I have like a UI to do that. And I don't have to go use kubectl and have access to a production cluster, heaven forbid, to go and dig into that. So there are definitely security improvements there that just come by using Argo CD. And that's part of the reason that the adoption's been so strong. But
exactly.
Well, cool. I think we covered the topic pretty well and introduced maybe a few concepts to the audience. I don't know if I haven't seen any questions come up yet. It looks like there's quite a few people watching on X. There's a few people on Twitch, a few people on YouTube. So as you have questions, feel free to reach out. And again, make sure to follow us either on X, Argo Unpacked, on LinkedIn. You can find the Argo Unpacked link there. You can search Argo Unpacked, and we are in Blue Sky as well. I don't have the link right here. And regardless of any of these, make sure to go to codefresh.io/Argo-Unpacked to subscribe for updates. We'll send you a newsletter, let you know not only when we're doing new episodes, but we actually also take a lot of the content from these episodes and we put them into the newsletters so that if you missed a key component or key piece of news, you'll get that in your email inbox and can catch up with it. Andrew, as we come to a close, any final words, things you want to promote or shout out?
A lot of it just comes down to this is uncharted territory to still a lot of people. The community, especially on the Argo side, is incredibly welcoming. So if you haven't had a chance to engage with the community, highly recommend it. Getting out there into the Slack channels, the mailing list, etc. Introducing yourself, saying, "Hey, I'm trying to solve X, trying to do Y." And if you look to promote new paradigms and new patterns, get involved because we're just guessing a lot of times. So if we're not able to hit your use case or you have a different opinion, have it heard. We want to hear about it.
Yeah, and if you're interested in working on this stuff, hey, PRs are open, and I think we could probably improve the experience of pushing workload identity as a default for things like clusters, repositories. But in the meantime, at least they're in the documentation, and there is a pathway to use those things. So that should get you at least somewhat down the road while there's some of those improvements being made. And shout out to Neboza, who says hello from the HTEC group. Hello back, my friend. Thanks for joining. And until next time, that's it for Argo Unpacked, Monday, April 7th. Happy trails, folks.
See y'all.